In this video, we're talking about the QuickBooks integration with Studio Suite. Now, for today's purposes, we're going to use QuickBooks Online, but it works basically the same for QuickBooks Desktop for PC and Desktop Enterprise for PC, and also for Xero. So what we're going to do is connect Studio Suite to QuickBooks Online. It takes about a minute. Then we're going to import the contacts from QuickBooks. Then we're going to create a Studio Suite project from the calendar module. Then we're going to make a Studio Suite invoice from that project. Then we're going to export that invoice out to QuickBooks. Then after that, we're going to talk about how it's all done. So let's take a look. So here we are at the home screen of Studio Suite. Notice that we do need to be in FileMaker Pro to make the initial connection to Studio Suite. After that, we can access Studio Suite and export invoices from the browser. So I'm going to go to Setup, and then I'm going to go to External APIs. I'm going to choose the company. Because Studio Suite can have multiple companies, I'm going to choose the company I'm working with and the user, which is me. And then I'm going to go ahead and click this button here. And so now I'm saying connect Planet Perfect Productions with the user of Joel to the external app, which in this case will be QuickBooks. So I click on that. What it's going to do is open up this window where I can log in to QuickBooks. And now it's going to ask me if I want to do this. Yep, I do. There is a success. And so here I'm now connected. So that's all it took to get it connected. Now what I want to do is import the contacts from QuickBooks. So before I do that though, let's jump in and look at contacts. And we'll see here that we've got 8 records. So these are the 8 records that I've already got in Studio Suite. I'll go back to my setup area. This time I'm going to go to Module Preferences. We're on the Invoice module. I'm going to go to Accounting System Export Settings and hit Setup. And here's a little button. It says Import Customers. So I'm going to click on that. Churns for just a little bit. And now customers from QuickBooks Online were successfully imported to Studio Suite Contacts module. Let's go take a look. I'll come up here and I'll hit Find All, and now we can see that we have 18. Previously we had 8, so we can see that 10 have been imported. Now what we're going to do is go to Calendar, and here we'll see some of the sample data that ships with Studio Suite. I'm going to go ahead and drag out Studio A for 3 days, and then I also want Andy Engineer to be working within there. So I'm going to go ahead and book this as a project, and I'll do Proceed. Here we are in the project. I'm going to call this Export to QBO. That's the name of my project. And I also need to specify a client. So I'm going to go ahead and choose, let's say, Jeannie Thompson. That'll be the client for this project. And so this is what we originally booked. And let's suppose at this point the client's on the phone and they add a camera to their request. So here's a list of my cameras. I'm going to go ahead and grab this one, and I'll add that to the project. And the range there was for 3 days, so it's booked it for 3 days. Now, I'm going to maybe make some changes. I'm going to adjust the price of this, make it $100, something like that. You get the idea. We can override all those prices. Let's take a look at the total for the project by clicking on View Totals, and we'll see now that the total is $3,700. Now, I can either manually click all of these checkboxes, or I can use the gear tool to select all for invoice, and notice it's going to now go and check all of those checkboxes for me, so I don't have to do it. The next thing we're going to do is invoice the selected items. I'll go ahead and click that. This is going to transfer all of the line items in this project out to an invoice. I can call this either a final invoice or a partial. I'll do a partial, just to indicate that I might have to come back later and add more items to this project if the client takes another day or anything like that. So here we are in the Studio Suite invoice, and if we want, we can go ahead and print it out from here, just to show you what that looks like. Here's the invoice. We originally drug that out in the calendar, and now it's on a printed PDF invoice. And now what I want to do is export to QBO. So this button panel only appears if you are connected to QuickBooks. So I'll go ahead and click that button. This is asking for a client PO. We can either send it out with or without a PO. I'm going to export anyway. Maybe better to have a PO. And takes just a couple seconds. Here we go. Invoice exported to QuickBooks Online successfully. It's telling me which invoice it was. So I'll hit OK on that. And now let's hide FileMaker. So let me go to the dashboard. There's Joel's company. I'm going to go to Sales. Here is Jeannie Thompson, the invoice for $3,700. So here's all of those things that I just booked. So Studio A for 3 days, and the engineer for 3 days, and the camera for 3 days. So that's pretty much it. It's that easy. So now that that's done, though, let me talk about a couple of the details. How did that work? So in Studio Suite, we call anything that you book a resource. And every resource can have multiple rates. So for example, if we go into the contacts module, here we have all of our people. If I go to Andy Engineer, I'm going to be able to look at under the Employee tab. I'm going to go to Rates. And here I can see I've got Andy Engineer Hourly. That says hourly rate. And if I click on that, this is going to bring up the detail of the rate, where we determine the unit of measure and the charge and the expense for Andy Engineer's hourly work. Here in the upper right is where we specify the external accounting details, or QuickBooks Online in this case. And that means that whenever we make an invoice with Andy Engineer, it's going to land in QuickBooks as an item type of service in the account services. Of course, you can edit this as needed to match whatever you have in QuickBooks. And so the same applies for rooms. If I go to the Rooms module and I go to Studio A, I go to the Rates tab. Here are the 3 rates, and if I go look at my Studio A hourly rate, I can see it's $125 an hour. And then over here, I've specified Service, Studio A, and Services as the QuickBooks accounting details. Once you have all those items specified, you're free to go ahead and create Studio Suite invoices in QuickBooks. A couple notes. One is that if you create new items, such as new people, new rooms, new equipment, new expendables, or new clients in Studio Suite, any new clients or resources that don't exist first in QuickBooks will get automatically made when you initially send out that first invoice. Now I'm going to go back to my slideshow for a minute here because some people ask, it's a good question, can you import items from QuickBooks? And the short answer for the moment is no, and here's why. When you look at QuickBooks items, they're all in one table. So you could have a mixture of rooms, equipment, people, expendables here. It's all in one list. Over in Studio Suite, however, as we just kind of went through, we have separate modules for each one of those. We've got contacts, rooms, equipment, expendables, and resources. And that's because each of those has a lot of other data relative to them that QuickBooks might not care about, but we do. For example, different formats in expendables, or in contacts, the full address information, all of the communications, all of the projects that have gone on with them, all the media assets and attachments that are related to them, and so on. So that's why there's no easy way to parse the items from the QuickBooks list, which is in one list, out to the separate modules within Studio Suite. To make it a little trickier, though, you'll notice that in QuickBooks, there's essentially one price for each item. Whereas in Studio Suite, we have a separate rates module, and this allows each resource to have multiple rates. For example, Studio A could have 3 rates, maybe an hourly rate for 100, maybe a daily rate for 1,000, and then maybe a weekend rate for 800. Of course, these prices are just random prices. Similarly, in contacts, we might have a guy named Robert who works sometimes as an editor for $50 an hour, sometimes as an engineer for $40 an hour, sometimes as a producer for $600 a day. And you may need all of those to show up in different accounts within QuickBooks. So that's why it's not easy to import a list from QuickBooks and have it show up in rates with all of the correct QuickBooks information. So there you have it. And that's pretty much Studio Suite talking to QuickBooks. Hope you enjoyed this video. Please let us know if you have any questions.